As a nutritionist and foodie, one of my main goals is to get you back into your kitchen to create home-cooked, scrumptious, delicious, varied meals so that you can reap all the benefits from the nutrients and reduce the inflammation-causing factors that we often get with store-bought food or when we eat out all the time. But are you also stumped by the question that pops up again and again and again, what to cook? Well, let me take you through a couple of steps tonight here that will tell you how you can ensure that you never run out of ideas. I'm Kirstin Nussgruber from Kirstin'sCancerCare.com, and what is important for me is to teach you to re-engage with what the kitchen has to offer. I know in the time that we live in that it's very stressful to figure out what to cook all the time. But let's take it down a notch and just reconnect with the fact that actually preparing food doesn't need to be that complicated if we have a certain strategy. So what is the strategy that ensures that you never run out of ideas? Well, quite frankly, I want you to think in certain categories, and the exact category that you choose for yourself, that depends on you and what works for you or even for your family. So some of my clients say, I always think about a protein. I think about what's going to be the protein that I'm going to offer in a particular dish, and then I kind of create the ingredients that go around with that. It feeds into a little bit how many of us grew up. You kind of have a starch, you have a vegetable, you got to eat those vegetables, right? Maybe a salad, and then you have your chunk of protein on the plate. And I really want to move you away from that a little bit, because a cancer protective way of eating, what is the underlying principle? And that is, we want to not have a high carbohydrate intake. Why? Because carbohydrates turn to glucose, and we know that that can cause an inflammatory environment in the body. In particular, if we do this all the time, that could potentially lead to all kinds of chronic conditions, not just feeding into cancer, but also other kinds of imbalances in the body, like insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, diabetes 2 as well, that can even underlie autoimmune conditions as well. So we want to kind of reduce our carb intake and move towards a low carb intake. But how do we do that when we've got in our minds, if we have the plate in front of us, we want to have some kind of starch there, some kind of protein there, some kind of vegetables there. Secondly, moving away from the carb load, I also want you to start engaging in the rich variety of vegetables, because we know that we need to increase our vegetable intake big time. But how do we do that if we think of cooking vegetables in single little digits? I'm going to serve broccoli tonight, and I'm going to serve maybe sweet potatoes tonight. I want you to move away from thinking of serving vegetables as full sides and thinking, how can I include them in a dish where I can fit as many in as possible, so that I'm exposed to this variety of antioxidants and phytonutrients that I know will benefit me. So by doing so, we also want to shift the focus away from this big slab of protein. We want to make sure that the protein amount we take in is moderate. Again, here, and of course this depends on whether you're very athletic or not, but still, proteins we need for are the amino acids that they deliver, many different types of amino acids that are responsible for building our cells, cellular repair as well, whereas the carbohydrates give us energy, but proteins can give us energy too. But we don't want to have too much protein in our diet either, because that in itself can cause inflammation too, and especially if it's the nature of the protein we're looking at. If it's not clean enough, protein can be contaminated with antibiotic residue, with growth hormone residue as well. So we got to keep that in mind as well. As animal protein too, in particular red meat, can be inflammation causing if the fatty acid ratio is favored too much more towards the saturated fats. We got to be mindful of that and keep the balance right. We want to have more of the polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats that we have often in vegetable proteins. We again want to keep the balance there. So I'm going back to my plate here, a chunk of protein. Of course, we want to include protein, but let's think of meal categories. And categories in which we can include as many vegetables as possible. I like to think of categories like this. What kind of a hearty salad meal can I offer when it gets to summertime, when we want to have lighter fare and we don't need this nourishing, deep, warm food necessarily. We can create hearty salads, and that can be your one meal. We can, for example, include some of the maybe gluten-free grains such as quinoa, and then add all kinds of different types of vegetables into that, and even protein in the form of legumes like maybe lentils or chickpeas. And that can become an incredibly hearty salad. And that's really all you need. That gives you all the nutrients that you need right there. And we can make it taste really delicious with the use of certain spices and fresh herbs in particular. That's something also that then can double up and you can use the next day for lunch, for example, or even making double portions. If you're moving away from salad meal, if you're saying soup meal. All right, so we are now back to the colder, more winter months. And if you think about it, I want to serve a soup a week. All right, think about that. I've got so and so many days in the week. I want to serve a soup a week. So already you have the soup category there. That will take care of one particular meal category. And in that soup, again, you can throw in as many possible vegetables as you can get in. You can serve it whole or you can serve it pureed. So maybe if you have younger kids, you can hide things in there that they don't necessarily know are in there. That's what I used to do when mine were younger. So it's really up to you what type of texture you like, but that can already steer you in a particular direction in terms of thinking, what ingredients do I need to get for that? We can think of a casserole meal. In other words, a one-pot meal that you put in the oven. All right, might be serving it with a salad. What can you put in a casserole meal? Well, we can go back to the old-fashioned lasagna, for example, which is a very strong comfort food. But instead of using pasta, think of using different layers of vegetables. You can use eggplant, for example. You can even use the so-called spaghetti squash that serves very nicely as a spaghetti replacement, or you can use the spiralizer and do your zoodles, your zucchini noodles or your carrot noodles, and layer it up with that, and even use meat. If you want to get ground meat, you can get buffalo meat or organic grass-fed meat, because the fatty acid content in there, the ratio is a little bit better, the omega-3s to the omega-6. So you're going to have more of the anti-inflammatory fatty acids in there than the pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids that we want to limit. We want to get that ratio better. So that's why grass-fed is really important, and organic is really important, because you don't want to have any residue in there from potentially antibiotics or even growth hormone use as well. So back to the meal category, that's a casserole dish that you can think, what can I put in there? Casserole food category can also include something like a quiche, and quiche doesn't necessarily need to be made with a crust, with a dough. You can do, basically it's like more of a frittata, where it's an egg dish, and there again you can throw in all kinds of different vegetables to create the color that really is pleasing to the eye, as well as just the opportunity to have a bit of a rainbow display of your vegetables there as well. Then you can do, to get back to the one pot meal category as well, I think chili, for example, that's also a one pot meal. So you can create a vegetarian chili. There you can go wander through your different meat bases if you want as well. And again, a different variety of vegetables can go into that. So one pot meal. If you are thinking more in the strategic categories, I challenge you, instead of going starch, protein, and vegetable, go into two categories. So you have your protein, and then you have a really nice low-carb vegetable dish. So for example, if in a protein category you want to do something with chicken, you can again bake this in the oven and create a creamy sauce with it, made with coconut milk or crushed tomatoes. But in other words, you want the chicken to simmer in a liquid, in a creamy liquid. And then as the one only other side dish, for example, let's take some cauliflower rice. You can take normal brown rice as well. I would just pre-cook that beforehand, before then creating a stir fry in the pot. But cauliflower rice, which is so easy to make yourself, I know you can buy it now too, which of course is a great help. But if you just have a handheld grater and you take your cauliflower, you cut it in half, the whole head of cauliflower, and just grate it down, it's done in less than 4 or 5 minutes. And cleanup is easy because it's just your handheld grater rather than your food processor, which takes a lot longer to clean up. So I wouldn't even bother with that. So now you have this pile of grated cauliflower. How does that turn into really a delicious side dish that serves as now one main side dish served with the protein? There you throw in your different vegetables. So for example, some green, 1 or 2 greens can always find their way in there. You can do kale, you can do Swiss chard, you can do spinach. Then you can grate some carrot into it. You can cut up a fennel that's in season right now. We find that in the stores right now. So again, here it's mushrooms as well. You can put mushrooms in that as well. But in other words, augment the side dish, try and put different vegetables into it, and that's what you serve with your protein. Maybe your creamy coconut infused skinless chicken thighs, for example. Then you have those 2 dishes, which, you know what, you can do that, you can double that up so easily, and it can serve as dinner or even parts of that for lunch the very next day as well. So getting back to my main categories, you see how if you think, all right, I've got 7 days in each week, what am I going to do now? First of all, come to the realization I don't necessarily need to cook from scratch every single day. I can double up. Or I can maybe decide this week I'm going to cook 3 meals and they are going to serve throughout the week. Sometimes we have that here too. We actually end up with leftovers from 3 different evenings, and then we have a whole leftover meal as well. So you can often repurpose leftovers by just adding something to it. Something, often a liquid, can be added to it. I made a vegetarian lentil kind of a stew that I served with wild rice, and what happened is, because I reheated it, it kind of got a little bit more mushy. I used 1 big fat sweet potato cut up into chunks in that too. So what I did now for tonight is I just added some liquid to it. So now it's a soup, it's a pureed soup, and I'm going to add some fresh spinach into it, which is of course going to wilt into the soup. And there you have a whole repurposed leftover meal. So again, decide what meal categories you're going to go for. Are you going to do a full salad meal? Are you going to do a casserole? Are you going to do a soup? Are you going to do a 1-pot dish like a stew, a slow cooker meal, for example, something in your Instapot? Or are you actually going to serve kind of side dishes, have a traditional protein meal, for example, my coconut tomato chicken baked over in the oven, or you can do that in a big skillet as well. Or you want to do some fish, some baked fish with a little bit of dill over it, a little bit of lemon juice, and then have this one other side dish where you try and keep it low carb and you throw in as many different vegetables as you possibly can. Roasting a couple of vegetables as well, lower heat to maintain nutrient quality, is always very helpful. Do that ahead of time, because then you have access to this to just basically combine that. You can do that in a salad, you can do that in a dish like a stir-fry type of dish like that as well, and that makes it easy to assemble, to get together when it comes to the time of actually preparing the meal. But also, always, one other really important tool that I use is make sure that you have certain staples at home all the time. So have your freezer ready, if you are a meat eater, have your ground meats in there frozen, have chicken in there, different types of chicken pieces, maybe drumsticks, maybe your skinless chicken thighs, your chicken breasts, or even whole chicken, have them there. In your vegetable fresh produce store, think every week of what you're going to buy. So some of the root vegetables that you want to keep in there that keep for much longer than 1 week. Carrots are always good to have on hand. Beets, the fennel bulb, for example, celery is always great to have. Then the greens, you want to always have 3-4 different types of leafy greens that you buy, have them in there as well. And then, of course, the staples are your brown rice, maybe your wild rice, which is really delicious. It's not actually a rice, that's actually a grass, but it's really delicious too. Your quinoa, for example, or your legumes, like what I used for my lentil soup. That was actually, it's also called dal. It's like the, it looks like split peas almost, and it's yellow in color, but it's a type of lentil. And why I like to use that, you get that in like an orange color as well, is you don't have to pre-soak it. So especially if you use a pressure cooker, which is what I do, then it really cooks up in 20 minutes, and it just cuts out that extra preparation step that we need to take if we want to cook other legumes like chickpeas or red kidney beans, if we want to cook them from scratch and we have to soak them overnight or at least 6 to 8 hours before. So again, how do you not run out of ideas besides going to recipe books, which of course is also something that I recommend that you do on a regular basis. Just dedicate some time, sit down and go through some recipe ideas but think meal categories again. Think whole meats, whole meal salads, think soups, think casseroles, think stir fries, think we're coming slowly, hopefully first signs of spring, we might be able to do some grilling again. There again, that's more of a separate dish, grilling. So what do I serve with it? You can just serve a huge, big, fat salad with that as well, with all kinds of things, and not just some greens and little bit slices of tomato or cucumber. You can grate root vegetables into that very easily too. You could take your cauliflower and roast that and put that in a fresh green salad as well. And that's another way of creating that one big side dish that then serves with your, for example, grilled chicken breast that you marinated before to reduce the carcinogenic content that happens when you grill animal protein. So take these as some ideas, and I hope that was a little bit helpful, but that's really how I do it. I think in meal categories, think what did we have? In summer, it's going to be a lot more salads that I think. In winter, it's going to be always what kind of a soup am I offering this particular week? What kind of one pot dish am I going to offer this week as well? And then they double up, of course. Or you take portions and you freeze them so that on those evenings that you can just obviously have to remember in the mornings to take it out so it can defrost. But very often I defrost something by just putting some warm water in my sink, and you put the frozen content in there, and that usually at least defrosts it enough that you can get it out of the container and then heat it up over on the stove, not the microwave if possible. So what I'm going to do for you is I have a recipe book. It's an ebook with really lovely colorful pictures for each recipe. It's called 21 Conquering Cancer Summer Salads. I know we're not in summer yet, but some of those salads are these full meal salads that I was referring to. I'm going to post that link in the comments so you can sign up for it, have access to that, and hopefully you'll get inspired by some of those recipes. Follow my blog on Kirstin'sCancerCare.com. Find me on YouTube. Follow my Facebook posts. There's lots of information shared there. It's all about empowering you and offering you nourishing information so that you are inspired by going back into your kitchen and creating a really healthy, wholesome body from the inside out. So Kirstin'sCancerCare.com, and I'm going to post that link right after I hop off this call. So take care for now.